Hello everyone, this is Nisha Sharma and my today's video is for the students of 6th standard where I'll be teaching you section B from 3rd unit just before wishes. You can see here this chapter is based on fiction. Actually, it's a science fiction story. And you can see these pictures. The author of the story is James Van Pelt, and he's an American science fiction author and a language teacher in Colorado. So let us start with story. See, Parker kept a sun in his desk. He fed it gravel and twigs and worms his gum when it lost its flavor. The warm varnish deck's top felt good against his forearms, and the deck's toasty metal bottom kept the chill of his leg. Now, today Mr. Earl was grading papers at the front of the class, every once in a while glancing up at the third grader to make sure none of them were talking or passing notes or looking out of the window. Parker would quickly shift his gaze down to his textbook to Mr. Earl, would not give him the glare or sure sign that Parker's name would soon go up on the board with the other kids who had lost their lunch privileges for the day. He could feel Mr. Earl's attention pass over him like a searchlight. तो ये बताया जा रहा है ये क्लासरूम है एंड इसमें देखो यू कैन सी दैट द टीचर इज डूइंग हिज वर्क एंड रेस्ट ऑफ द स्टूडेंट्स आर सिटिंग इन द क्लास. सो यहाँ एक लड़का है जिसका नाम पाकर है. उसने अपने डेस्क के अंदर बहुत सारे छोटे छोटे कंकड़ पत्थर बोल सकते हैं वो डाल रखे हैं. ट्विग्स हैं, मतलब छोटी छोटी टहनियां जिससे हम कहते हैं, वो सब है. इनफैक्ट उसने अपने च्युइंगम को भी इसके अंदर डाल रखा है जिसका फ्लेवर बिल्कुल खत्म हो गया है. तो इसके डेस्क के अंदर ही फील्स दैट देयर इज अ he kept a sun in his desk. So now see, now Mr. Earl, the name of the teacher is Mr. Earl, and he is what he's doing. He was grading papers in front of the class only, and at every once in a while what he is doing that he was glancing up at the third graders that कि कोई किसी से बात ना कर रहा हो या किसी को कोई नोट्स पास कर रहा हो या कोई विंडो के बाहर देख रहा हो. So make sure to make all these things sure he used to put a glance on them. And Parker was also like, you know, he was what happened, he quickly shift his gaze down to his textbook, so Mr. Earl would not give him the glare. ठीक है. And he was not he was knowing that Mr. Earl was giving a glance to every third grader. तो वो ये नहीं चाहता था कि उसको भी वो कुछ करते हुए ऐसा देख ले. तो इसी वजह से उसने अपना धीरे से डेस्क के अंदर उसने अपने जो पीबल्स हैं उसको उसने क्या किया है कि वहां पे डाल दिया है. नाउ बिकॉज वाई, क्योंकि उसे ये डर था कि और जो बच्चे थे जिनको पनिशमेंट मिला है उनको उस दिन का लंच करने से रोक दिया गया. उस दिन उनको अपना लंच करने नहीं मिलेगा. तो इसी वजह से उसे पता था कि जो मिस्टर अर्ल है उनका जो attention है it was passing over him like a searchlight. So that is why he was very careful and alert about that. So what he did, slipping a pebble out of his pocket, Parker carefully lifted his desktop a quarter of an inch and slipped the rock in. It made a tiny clink when it dropped to the bottom. He leaned the desk away from him until he heard the pebble roll towards the sun, followed by the tiny hiss that meant the rock has vanished into it. So usne, what happened, that pebble slipping out of his pocket, Parker, what he did, he carefully lifted. उसने धीरे से एकदम उसको lift करके what he did, he अपना जो you can see here, see he just left up his desk the top the part which was there, what he did, उसने उसको धीरे से उठाया. You can see here, he lifted it, and what he did, he put the rock inside it. ठीक है, he slapped it ऐसे करके, and it made a tiny clink. थोड़ा सा it made a tiny clink when it dropped at to the bottom. जो नीचे bottom में वो गया तो थोड़ा सा आवाज आई. He leaned the decks away from him until he heard the pebble to rolled towards the sun. वो तब तक उसकी आवाज आई जब तक कि it rolled towards the sun, followed by the tiny hiss. मतलब it followed by tiny hiss, and that means that rock had vanished into it. इसका मतलब ये हो गया कि वो जो rock है वो वहां पे जाके गायब हो चुका है. Now, you see what happened. 2 days ago, he had opened his desk to put his lunch in, but instead of the pencil box, tissue box and books, he expected to see a cloud ring in the space. At his center was a dull, pulsing red glow. So, अभी 2 दिन पहले क्या हुआ था? He had opened his desk to put his lunch in. उसने अपना lunch रखने के लिए desk को open किया था ऊपर से. But instead of pencil box, tissue box and box, he expected to see a cloud, है ना? But it was nothing like that. At its center was a dull, pulsing red glow. So now what happened? He shut the desk and looked around to see if anyone else had noticed. तो उसने एकदम से वो desk को बंद किया and he wanted to see that किसी और ने आसपास notice को नहीं किया. An hour later, the dusty spring in his desk had contracted to a bright spot in the middle. He cautiously moved his hand towards it. At first he felt only the heat, but when he got within a few inches, the skin was on his palm began to stink. Now, you know what is palm? This is palm. So what happened? At first what happened? He only felt that he felt heat. He felt it was very hot. But when he got within a few inches, and then he put his palm over there, so he felt that it began to stink. मतलब ऐसे चिपकने वाला. So like the flesh was pulling away. इसका जो flesh है, चमड़ी जो है, skin, वो ऐसे बाहर की तरफ मतलब stink कर रहा है. So what he did, he just snatched his hand back. उसने अपना हाथ पीछे की तरफ खींच लिया. When the point moved close enough, the pencil tugged towards the sun. It had snapped out of his fingers into the tiny light, brightening it slightly in the process. Now see what happened. Now the sun was as large as a golf ball. When Parker rolled a marble across his desk, its path would curve towards the sun within, sometimes circling several times before resting exactly above it. Now Parker, Mr. L said, अब इतना इधर these all things happened. Now Parker, Mr. L said that Parker, your reading group is waiting for you. He said कि तुम्हारा जो reading group है वो तुम्हारे लिए wait कर रहे हैं. At the back of the class, his 3 reading partners sat on the mats. उसके 3 reading partners देखो यहाँ पे mat में बैठे हुए हैं. Their books on their lap. Parker pushed away from his desk and joined them. ठीक है. Parker also what happened? He pushed away from his desk. वो अपने desk से निकल के वहां जाके उनको ज्वाइन करता है. Where's the book? Mr. L said. Now what happened? He asked it. क्या हुआ तुम्हारी बुक कहाँ है? His eyebrow contracted into a single line above his eyes. ठीक है. Now what happened? His eyebrow जो है what happened? It contracted into a single line. एक single line में ऐसे हो जाता है ना eyebrow जब हम ऐसे contract करते हैं, means like अपनी आईब्रोज को ऐसे सीधे करते हैं तो सिंगल लाइन बन जाती है आंख के ऊपर दोनों आईब्रोज से, वो वैसे हो जाता है. नाउ Parker shrugged. Mr. L growled, "You need to be more responsible, young man. Go get your book." Now he said that, okay, now you go and get your book. Now what happened? Why you're so irresponsible? The other students looked on, relieved that Mr. L's attention was on Parker and not on them. So other students, what happened? They thought that we are relieved now कि जो Mr. L का attention है वो Parker पे है, हमारे ऊपर नहीं है. I don't have it, sir, said Parker. Parker said, मेरे पास बुक तो नहीं है. It had disappeared into the sun along with everything else. So he said कि वो तो सन के साथ सन में disappear हो गया और भी जो सारी चीजें थी वो भी disappear हो गया. Mr. L's hand clenched slightly. Parker clinged at his teacher, pushed away his desk. Mr. Earl almost never left his desk. Students came to him. He did not go to students unless the infraction was terribly bad. Now, what happened? Mr. Earl's hand clenched slightly. Okay. Mr. Earl's hand clenched slightly, and what happened? That he clenched slightly. Parker clenched at his teacher, pushed away his desk. Now he by डर से जैसे ऐसे हाथ को पीछे की तरफ कर लेते हैं, तो Parker did that. Now Mr. Earl almost never left his desk. So he almost never left his desk. Who? Mr. Earl, the teacher. Now students came to him. Okay, he did not go to students. Now what happened? He did not go to the students, and the students came to him. Now unless the infection was terribly bad, कि जब तक कि मतलब जो situation था वो terribly bad नहीं हो जाता. So students, unless the infection was terribly bad, means जब तक कि situation ऐसी नहीं हो जाती कि infractions means to break rule, कि हम उस तरीके से rule को break करके जाएं, unless it is not terribly bad. Now you young man are responsible. Remember our talk about responsibility on the first day of school. So Mr. Earl said that the you young man are responsible. तुम लोग जिम्मेदार हो किस चीज के लिए? Remember our talk about responsibility on the first day of school. He said that do you remember? So you remember the talk which we had about responsibility on the very first day of school. He looked at each of his students. तो उन्होंने अपने सारे बच्चों को एक बार देखा. Who nodded in turn. Okay, so what happened? They nodded in turn. Nodded means ऐसे सर हिलाना. It's your book. Isn't your book in your desk where it belongs? Okay, so he said ki your book isn't your books in your desk where it belongs? No sir, said Parker. How could he explain about the swing dusk, the pulsing red glow, the sun pointing pinpoint of light? All these questions he asked. Now, of course, that is where your book should always be. Everything in its place. A place of everything, isn't it that right? His question sounded like a accusation. Okay. Accusation means any statement saying that someone is guilty of a crime or an error. किसी को हम accuse करते हैं ना किसी चीज के लिए कि हाँ ये तुम्हारी गलती है, उसको हम accusation बोलते हैं. Now Parker nodded, but my book isn't there, Mr. Earl. Parker ने अपना सिर हिलाया, उसने माना हर चीज को जो भी Mr. Earl ने बोला, but he said कि मेरा बुक वहाँ पे नहीं है. The teacher took two long strides and stood beside Parker's desk. टू मीन्स उन्होंने 2 लंबे कदम से वो आगे बढ़े और वो पार्कर के डेस्क के पास आके खड़े हो गए. बिफोर द बॉय कुड स्पीक, मतलब पहले वो पार्कर कुछ बोलता, मिस्टर एर्ल थ्रू द डेस्क ओपन. सो व्हाट ही डिड, ही ऐसे करके उन्होंने डेस्क को ओपन किया. फॉर अ सेकेंड he stared into it. He stared मतलब कुछ टाइम तक उन्होंने उसमें वो देखते रहे, है ना. A white glow reflected off his face. एक बिल्कुल white glow उनके face पे reflect करती है. What is this? He said. अरे ये क्या है? He said as he reached towards the brightness. ठीक है. Careful, Mr. Earl, Parker started to say, but it was too late. Parker ने तब बोला कि ध्यान से, Mr. Earl. The teacher was cringed before lurching. Okay, suddenly what happened, he forward towards it, and he went down quickly. His feet vanished into the desk last. और धीरे धीरे क्या हुआ, उनकी जो feet है, what happened, it vanished into the desk last. Now a long silence filled the room. Parker stood up and walked back to his desk. Now what happened, Parker, he stood up and he walked back to his desk. The sun within had grown its heat, baking like a tiny oven. He closed the top, which snapped down hard on its own at the last moment. Now the other students hadn't moved. Parker looked at them. They looked at him. Over the intercom, a bell softly chimed. Said Parker, and they all ran outside to play. What happened after this incident? जो पाकर है उसने बच्चों को देखा, बच्चों ने भी उसे देखा, and then after the bell rang softly, and then after they all again that what happened? Parker said कि now it's recess time, and they all ran outside to play. So it was just a fiction science story, science fiction story. So it was just an imagination. ऐसा होता नहीं है बिल्कुल भी कभी. तो ये पाकर की fiction की story थी, and you also might have many imaginations. So if you want, you can also make a note of your imagination if you have any imagination like this. So I'll accept it if you can make, and send me a note of that. Well, please read this chapter at home, and if you have any problem, any doubt, you can call and ask me regarding the chapter. Rest question answers and rest of the book work, you'll be getting it in PDF form. So please make sure you finish all your work in fair notebook. We'll see you in my next class. Till then, stay safe, stay home. Thank you.